This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Governor Pritzker leaves no doubt he will seek a third term as Illinois governor. But does he intend to serve out that entire four-year term?
I'm running for governor of Illinois. I want to be governor of Illinois. That's 4 more years, yeah.
So, yes, although if he does run for president, he'd probably have to fire up a presidential campaign not long after he takes office in January 2027. That's assuming he wins re-election here in Illinois. So maybe we should pose that question to him again.
I'm running for governor today because I want to be governor of Illinois. I have worked hard to get our state moving forward, and we have yet more to do.
But will you serve a 4-year term?
Everything that I do, truly everything that I do in my job and every day when I wake up is about improving the lot of people who live in the state of Illinois.
So, no, I have no idea. Actually, those answers are pretty clear, to be honest. The presidential campaign is on, and today's launch is a dress rehearsal for a message that will resonate nationally.
We must reckon with the fact that everything is too damned expensive. From groceries to concert tickets to mortgages to cars to health care, we have created a world where one job isn't enough to raise kids.
But back to the subject at hand, could this become the incumbent governor's biggest liability? The notion that he'll almost immediately have to pivot to running a national campaign. One key thing to watch for is Pritzker's choice of running mate, which he said would come before the end of the summer. As you know, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton will not return by virtue of her run for Illinois, for U.S. Senate, that is. So look for Pritzker to pick someone he believes can step in and do a lot of the day-to-day executive work of managing the 5th largest state in the country. And let the speculation begin as to who exactly that person could be.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Governor Pritsker barnstorms the state as he launches his 3rd bid for Illinois governor. But is everyone on board? Illinois is the capital of out-of-state abortions, according to a new study, as the Supreme Court deals a blow today to Planned Parenthood. We dive in. And part 2 of our conversation with retired 4-star General Stanley McChrystal on war, peace, and character.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
I'm running for re-election to protect our progress and continue solving the problems we face. I love this state, and it's the honor of my life to serve as your governor. To help lead through the most...
Governor Pritzker launches his campaign at the geographic center of the state, Chestnut, Illinois. And before taking the show on the road, he started on the south side of Chicago this morning, where he held a rally at the Grand Crossing Fieldhouse on 76th and Ingleside. And that's where he launched his campaign initially 8 years ago. Now, the governor is taking this campaign from Chicago to Rockford, Peoria, and Springfield today, and then will travel to the southern quadrants of the state tomorrow. I caught up with his current number 2 lieutenant governor. She is also a candidate for U.S. Senate, Juliana Stratton. She said their administration has been focused all along on the working class.
This isn't new for us here in Illinois. We have always been focused on uplifting working families. That was our platform when we ran the first cycle, the second time, and that's what the governor is going to continue to build upon. We've made life more affordable. I mean, we've eliminated medical debt. We cut the grocery tax. We are creating jobs. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We have always focused on how to make life more affordable for Illinoisans, and we'll continue to do that work.
Republicans have criticized the fact that overall spending has gone up under your and the governor's term. What about that criticism?
Well, look, I mean, Republicans who have not voted for any of our balanced budgets, we've had 7 consecutive balanced budgets. We're focused on bringing real leadership to the state of Illinois that provides compassion, but also fiscal stability. That's what's important. When I took office, you know, as a state rep, that's when we had 2 years without a balanced budget, and now we've had 7 consecutive balanced budgets. So I don't think they're the best spokespersons for how to lead with responsibility. Governor Pritzker and I have been doing that.
And for an alternate view, we're joined by the Illinois House Republican leader, Tony McComey of downstate Savannah. Leader McComey, always good to talk to you. You heard the Lieutenant Governor, a balanced budget, credit ratings upgrades. You've been on the opposite sides of the governor on most issues, but are those some selling points?
Well, they certainly sounded good, but the fact of the matter is, since the governor's been in place, we have raised our budget by 38%. So if you're trying to help the working class and you're working for the working class, then why would you raise the cost by 38% on how they live?
And let me ask you, the elephant in the room here, is it a problem to you if he wins, he would likely have to turn around and run for president pretty quickly?
Well, I think it's a disservice to the people of Illinois, regardless if you're a Republican, an independent, or a Democrat, because you need to have somebody who is fully committed to our state. And as you heard, I don't think that he is.
And I mean, he has said in those responses, he's doing this because he loves Illinois, but he would not say, I will serve 4 years. So far, the only declared Republican is DuPage County Sheriff James Mendrick. Is he the best shot that Republicans have at taking back this office, or are there others?
Well, I think now that the governor has put his intentions out there, I think you'll start seeing some other candidates come forward. And I'll certainly have an opinion when it's an appropriate time to weigh in on that.
Do you want to give us any potential names?
Well, I can tell you who's not running for governor.
The person I'm talking to right now.
Yeah,
You've got a lot of business to tend to in this state. Do you think there's going to be a special session this summer to deal with things like transit funding?
I don't think so. Recently just saw an interview with some of the Democrats that have been on that working group, and I think we will wait until veto session in October. It'll be here before we know it, and I think to have a special session over the summer during when petitions start August 5th, I think it's really going to be hard to get the Democrats to go to Springfield.
All right, and then would you have any thoughts on who Pritzker's running mate might be? Any rumors swirling around down in Springfield?
I really haven't heard much, but I certainly hope that he chooses a Democrat that is fiscally responsible if they still exist.
All right. Tony McComey telling it like it is, as always. We really appreciate you joining us. Have a great evening.
Anytime. Thank you.
Illinois saw more people traveling from out of state for abortion care than any other place in the nation. That's according to a study from the Guttmacher Institute. Now, these figures come as the Supreme Court has dealt a major blow to Planned Parenthood in a ruling that came down today. And joining me is Sarah Garza-Resnick, Chief Executive Officer at Personal PAC, and Peter Breen, Executive Vice President and Head of Litigation at Thomas More Society. Thank you both for joining us. First to that Supreme Court ruling today, Sarah Garza-Resnick, it essentially blocked a Medicaid patient from suing to force coverage at Planned Parenthood that this patient was seeking. Unpack this for us. What's the ultimate effect?
I mean, it's a shameful day in America. Donald Trump's handpicked Supreme Court justices stripped women on Medicaid of the freedom of deciding who their doctors are and where they access health care. And that health care are things like mammograms and cancer screenings and access to birth control.
And basically, the Supreme Court, it was a minimal ruling, Peter Green. I mean, it didn't necessarily rule that the state could defund Planned Parenthood. But what do you think the ultimate effect is this?
Well, and the ultimate effect here is that states don't have to spend their taxpayers' money over with organizations like Planned Parenthood that profit off abortion or distribute these dangerous gender transition drugs to minors. That's the state's right. Now, but I will say this, as a lawyer, the whole point here, the legal idea was really not a big deal. If this weren't about abortion, the lawyers would be going, well, yeah, of course, you can't sue if Congress doesn't give you a right to sue, which they didn't give you. The problem we've had is the courts have expanded concepts in law to try to accommodate Planned Parenthood or the abortion right. And so really if this weren't about abortion, this would be a ho-hum decision from the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, though, because abortion is so politicized, the law, we're having to discuss it, as if it were the end of the world instead of just a regular legal ruling that makes a lot of sense to constitutional lawyers.
And again, Sarah Garza-Resnick, we mentioned it's kind of a narrow ruling. So are there other fronts that Planned Parenthood plans to fight to be able to continue to be funded through Medicaid in all 50 states?
Yeah, I don't think women's health care is ho-hum. It's not a joke. When people die when they don't have access to preventative health care screenings like mammogram and cancer screenings and STI treatment. And access to birth control is essential. I don't think any woman in this country or the people who love us think our access to healthcare is ho-hum.
And we also mentioned this study from the Guttmacher Institute that shows 34,000 people traveling to Illinois from out of state to get an abortion. Peter Breen, you know, the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision was a victory for the pro-life movement, but it has also led to this situation. Is this sort of maybe the law of unintended consequences here, that abortion is actually up in the state of Illinois?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have become the hub for abortion for the entire southeastern United States. They come to southern Illinois. Our neighboring states all come to us. I mean, people are coming to Illinois from around the country to get abortions. And so, you know, the people of Illinois, they have to make a decision. Do we want to be the abortion capital of the country? Is that really what we want to be known for? You know, I mean, look, we just put, you know, the Speaker of the House, when I was in the legislature, Mike Madigan, you know, he's going to go to prison for years. You know, is this really, are we going to add that to our list? I mean, we have to answer that, though, as Illinoisans. You know, is this what we want to be? And hopefully we don't. But I do want to make the point, you know, no one is losing coverage or care because of this decision. The state of South Carolina was very careful. They said, look, for all of the legit healthcare decisions, we're not talking about abortion and gender transition drugs for minors. You know, they made sure that there was going to be care. It's just, you can't go, you know, they're not going to have an abortion clinic do it. They're not going to have Planned Parenthood do it. So it's really a misnomer there, you know, from my learned colleague. I mean, look, folks are not going to lose care because of this decision.
All right, Sarah Garza-Resnick, I do want to stick on this topic of this study. When you look at this number, 35,000 folks coming to Illinois for abortion care, Illinois being sort of the hub, because it is a blue state and a sea of red, are healthcare providers in the state equipped for this volume and this demand?
Thank you for the question, Paris. We have worked very hard with our elected officials and other advocates to make sure that Illinois has robust protections for reproductive health care, including abortion. Almost 2/3 of the people who received abortions in Illinois last year were our neighbors and our colleagues and our friends, people that depended on that life-saving essential health care. The rest of the people who had to come here from out of state came here because their elected officials think they know more about their bodies than themselves and their doctors. And those people had to leave their family and their friends and their jobs and come to this state to receive life-saving essential health care.
Peter Breen, President Donald Trump and his campaign was kind of back and forth on this because this is a touchy political issue, but is it your belief that Republicans that control both branches of Congress, both houses of Congress and the executive branch as well, want to go for a national abortion ban, given the situation in states like Illinois and elsewhere?
No, that's not the position of the Republican Party at this point. Certainly, you know, as a personal matter and organizationally, we at the Thomas More Society are pro-life, you know, from you know, we're pro-life from conception to natural death. And so, but that's a position that the American people don't necessarily agree on. And, you know, abortion is still our most contentious social issue, has been for many, many years. That debate will continue. You know, the thing that the Republicans did agree on, or appear to be agreeing on in Congress, is that they do not want Planned Parenthood or other abortion entities doing Medicaid services. So you may see the whole country's abortion clinics be funded from Medicaid. So that says, hey, we're going to make sure essential coverage is provided, but we don't want to combine it with abortions. We don't want to combine it with, you know, these services that we find objectionable. So that, you know, that's happening there. You know, I would say too, though, you know, this business of what we've done in Illinois, you know, it's not like we've become you know, we're just the hub for abortions. We're not exactly the poster child for you know, appropriate abortion. You know, we're not, you know, the poster child for this. I mean, we allow abortions with no ultrasound. We're letting non-doctors into this, you know, doing abortions. We really, it's not like we've improved safety standards or care standards here. We just opened the floodgates. And so people are coming in and, you know, we don't have parental notice. So your 14-year-old can be brought into Illinois and aborted. this is not something we should be proud of.
All right, Peter Breen, I'm sorry, and Sarah Garza-Resnick, thank you so much for joining us. Stanley McChrystal is a retired four-star general who led the coalition forces during the war in Afghanistan. I sat down with McChrystal this week at the University Club of Chicago, where he was promoting his new book called On Character. In that book, he recounts the day in 2010 he submitted his resignation to President Obama after a controversial article came out in Rolling Stone magazine where McChrystal was critical of then Vice President Joe Biden.
And I go into the president's office, and he was cordial. I mean, you know, as cordial as you're going to be in a situation like that. He asked what happened. I said, I actually don't know. I haven't had time to investigate it, but here's my resignation. If you want to accept it, I got no problem with that. I'll step aside and good. If you want me to go back in command, I'll do that too. Whatever you think's best for the mission. He was very good. He says, I'm going to accept your resignation. And in that instant, my career's over. Now think about it. I'm no longer a commander. I'm no longer a general. I'm no longer a soldier. And for the length of the media cycle today, I was this publicly disgraced figure that's on the ticker on the TV every 45 seconds. My 86-year-old father's watching it down where he lives. My son, still in college at Florida State, seeing it. So it's pretty painful. And so I was probably in shock is the closest thing. I mean, I'd known I was going to, you know, you prepare yourself, but when that happens and you suddenly have all those things that define your identity being wiped away or at least challenged, I get in the vehicle and we drive back across the city. My wife was living in Army quarters in Fort McNair in D.C. And I get there and I kind of, you know, collect myself and I walk in the front of the house, these old quarters, and my wife is standing in the entranceway. And I looked at her and I said, it's over. He accepted my resignation. And Annie looks at me and she goes, good. We've always been happy and we'll always be happy. It was the most amazing moment. I even recognized it in the instant. Because what she could have done is she could have gone, you got screwed, boom, 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 you know, all this kind of stuff. She didn't. She said, okay, it happened. We're going to move forward. She's never once changed her attitude. I tell people she lives life like she drives, with no use for the rearview mirror. So, but the reality is the best thing in the world, because in that moment you get a choice. You can be a bitter old general, and you guys would probably have me here for lunch so I could complain about being wronged. But that doesn't last, and it's kind of pointless. And you can't have a life if that's what you're going to be. You're always looking backwards. So we made the decision to look forward, and that was 15 years ago. 2 days ago. 15 years ago. And, oh, thanks. In my life, that was the worst day of my life, for sure. In some ways, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made me think, it made me change. We led life in a new direction, and it forced me to prove to myself what kind of person I am. Because there's a temptation that people write something about you that insinuates you're not. You want to spend the rest of your life proving to yourself and everybody else you're not that. And so that wasn't a bad thing. And so I think all of us, if we can think about that kind of, you know, I don't wish that on anybody. And I did cancel my subscription to Rolling Stone. So, but the reality is I don't wish it on anybody, but most of us will have some kind of failure in our lives. And if you don't learn from it, then kind of what's the point?
Most Americans believe they're patriotic. They love their country. And yet, patriotism, I think you've said this, requires more than just voting, which many people still don't do. Right. Loving your country and believing that's part of your character requires more than just saying that you love your country, but never paying attention civically.
The Founding Fathers were great, but they're all dead. They're not here to help us. All the heroes, even from the greatest generation to a great degree, they're the history now. We are what we are today. So I tell people we're as good as we decide to be or as mediocre as we allow ourselves to be. 65% of Americans voted in the last presidential election. 65% of eligible voters. Which means that the winner, which got less than 50% because it was third-party candidates, is less than 50% of 65%. Do the math, we're in the low 30s. Afghanistan votes at a higher level than that. They did before the Taliban took over. So you think about that. Most of us get our citizenship by accident of birth. We didn't do anything for it. And so we get this idea if we don't want to follow the law, so we pay our taxes and whatnot. But everything else is just by choice. Very little is by, I feel responsible to do something, to be involved civically, to be involved in service. I'm a great proponent of national service for all young Americans, not military, you know, healthcare, education, all the different things they can do, because I think it ties you to the community differently if you've actually had to invest in it. But we don't ask ourselves to do much. When's the last time we demanded something of ourselves? This is going to be really hard. Everybody get ready. Instead, I don't know, I think we play victim. We didn't get everything we wanted or everything we deserved, and we complain about it. And I just think we can do that, but it's not healthy.
Some clips from my talk with General Stanley McChrystal this week at the University Club. And before we go tonight, a tribute to a television icon. Broadcast journalist Bill Moyers died today. Moyers came to journalism after serving as press secretary for President Lyndon Baines Johnson. He spent several decades broadcasting for PBS and was labeled by Walter Cronkite as the conscience of the nation. In fact, Moyers pioneered the in-depth interviewing style that I've tried to perfect throughout my career. He gave time to subjects that the rest of the media overlooked, and he was bold and empathetic in his commentary. He represented the highest ideals of what this medium could and should be for, to inform, educate, and provoke thought. Moyers was 91 years old, and we will miss him.